do you disagree with me that a simple phone call to those evacuees to determine what happened wouldn't have ascertained immediately that there was no protest? I mean, that was a piece of information that could have been easily obtained.
Well, but Senator,
within hours, if not days.
Senator, when you're in these positions, the last thing you want to do is interfere with any other process going on.
I realize that's a good excuse.
Number two, no, it's the fact. Number two, I would recommend highly you read both what the ARB said about it and the classified ARB, because even today there are questions being raised. Now, we have no doubt they were terrorists, they were militants, they attacked us, they killed our people. But what was going on and why they were doing what they were doing?
No. Again, we were misled that there were supposedly protests and then something sprang out of that, an assault sprang out of that. And that was easily ascertained that was not the fact. And the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
Can you imagine that question? Frank Gaffney, president and founder of the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C. Frank, had I not heard it, even as cynical as I am at my advanced age, I would not have believed that she would have said, what difference does it make? Are you sitting down?
Well, I'm not sitting down, but I'm not entirely surprised. What she's doing, obviously, is trying to be, the valiant defender of our dead Americans, when in fact she, contributed to the death of those Americans. And I don't mean specifically, Greg, because I don't know that we're at the bottom of this yet. Hopefully by the end of this day's hearings we'll be closer to it. Exactly what role she played in ensuring that they did not have the security that they were seeking in the compounds in Benghazi and all of that. What I'm talking about is Hillary Clinton's direct personal involvement in the policy that got these guys killed, which is a policy of engaging and empowering and emboldening and arming the very people who killed our ambassador and the 3 others. That's what she needs to be held accountable for. And sounded like the senator was getting close to it.
Well, he was, but
that needs to be clinched.
These guys don't know how to ask questions. They wax politician too fast. What nobody's done, and this is a sense in which, and my audience is probably sick of hearing me say this, but this is the sense in which they haven't laid a glove on her. Nobody has said, what did you know and when did you know it? Who told you? Right. What time was it? Did you advise the president? If so, when? And did you or did you not watch video? This is not one question, but a series. Was there video? Did you watch it? If so, what did it disclose to you? Did the president see the video? Did you see the video with the president? Where do you see in that array of videos there any evidence that a bunch of kooky Libyans decided to stroll out and kill some Americans one night? That's the beginning. Yeah. And then you go back and say, why were you not prepared? There's no way around that question, Frank. Tell me, Madam Secretary, why you were not prepared. It was 9/11 for crying outside. Sorry, I'm getting too fired up about this.
Well, you should be fired up. We all should be fired up about it. But all I'm saying is, Greg, part of it is you're right. You're not getting the prosecutorial treatment that we need, that the public deserves, that the times require. But all I'm saying is, I think as important as that line of questioning is, even more important is, what, Madam Secretary, was your role in promoting the idea and executing the idea that we would be well served as a nation by sending Christopher Stevens in to Libya to help arm jihadists? And in the first instance, those were jihadists who were overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi, who, until a few weeks before the decision to engage in the overthrow of Gaddafi, was regarded by the same Obama administration and Hillary Clinton as one of our great friends. in the Middle East? And then, Madam Secretary, what role did you play? What role have you been helping in executing the policy of arming jihadists in Syria?
You know, Rand Paul asked that question. Rand Paul asked that question.
Did he?
Yeah, and she scoffed and said she'd heard nothing about it. He responded, there have been news reports to that effect, and then they moved on. Now, I talked with Michael Ledeen this morning. He was critical of that that storyline. He says, I have scoured high and low, left and right, up and down, to find anybody in amongst his many contacts that would give credibility to the claim that he might have been involved in gun running. And he says, I can find absolutely nothing. So I don't know where we take that.
With all due respect to Michael, I think there is evidence. Whether Stevens was personally involved in it is a matter of conjecture, but we know for sure that a ship offloaded 400 tons of arms and other material, a Libyan ship, in a port in Turkey adjacent to Syria on September 6th. We know that for a fact. We also know that the Turkish consul general was in Benghazi the night of the murder of our ambassador. He was, in fact, the last official contact that anybody had with him. And the question that is, I think, perfectly legitimate is if that shipment had been uncovered, as I think it was, by Russian intelligence, and there was an urgent need to find out how to do damage limitation, because the President of the United States certainly didn't want anybody pointing out in the last days of this election that he was helping arm people who included in the so-called rebel coalition trying to topple Bashar Assad, al-Qaeda elements, in the last couple of days before he was elected or reelected. And that's, I personally believe, exactly why this ambassador was in that very dangerous place where he knew there was not adequate security on September 11th.
Todd?
Yeah, Frank, just to go back to what Rand Paul said, he directly asked her, are you aware of any buying or transferring of weapons to Turkey? And she, like Greg said, kind of almost tried to make a joke of it, like, where did you get that crazy notion? And he said, you know, there are news reports on it, and that kind of straightened her. I think she was totally caught off guard on that. And he said, so you have no knowledge of that? And she said no. So she's on the record as saying no.
Well, I hope that we will continue to probe that question and that there will be other witnesses who are brought in, because I'll tell you, I don't know that we've got a smoking gun, if I can use that expression, but I do think that there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that there isn't a better explanation for why Chris Stevens was in Benghazi under those circumstances on that particular day, except that he had an urgent need, and that would fit the bill with this problem with the exposure of this shipment of arms from Libya to Syrian rebels via Turkey.
Well, the testimony or the back and forth that I encourage you to look at, because I know you were covered up this morning during a good portion of this, is the Ron Johnson Q&A that you just heard that we played. John McCain lit into her, and her face was pretty much bright red for a while.
Oh, boy,
John Barrasso apparently did a nice job. I didn't get to hear his point. And Rand Paul was good. I didn't hear Marco Rubio's Q&A either, but Rand Paul was also very good on this. So hopefully out of this, and now she's got to go over to the House, and I don't think they're going to be any nicer than these guys were. I was surprised. There were some questions that should have been asked that weren't asked in the Senate hearing. I hope we get to hear those in the House this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've just been tied up in a meeting all morning, so I haven't seen any of this, but I look forward to it. Pleasure deferred.
All right, I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break. Frank Gaffney's our guest. Right back in mere moments. Stick around. We're back to work. Frank Gaffney, the guest of the Garrison Show. You know, Frank, it's I don't know, we spend a lot of time, and I'm grateful for every moment of it, together talking about these issues and the existential threats. The word has become common parlance. For a long time I didn't have the faintest notion what it meant. And now we sit here with everything sort of hyper-focused on something that is just truly historic. Whether it goes, nowhere or not, it's historic because we got a culprit right there in the rhetorical crosshairs where she can't get away. And if these guys don't crap out, fold their tent, or be afraid they won't get invited to the cocktail party, she could get scalped in this thing today. She's headed to the House of Representatives. This guy Trey Gowdy that I interviewed was a prosecutor in Virginia, I think. South Carolina, I'm sorry. And he's impressive. This is a guy that knows how to ask a proper question. And he's going to be on that committee this afternoon. Todd's not sure. I thought we knew that he was going to be there. There's some more adults in that room. And Frank, I can't think of a more important moment for the eyes of the public to be turned on to some of this stuff because the media has to cover this. They can't not do it. It's like a debate between presidential candidates. The rest of the time, the Republicans being pilloried and called names. But for 90 minutes, 3 times in the campaign, they have to portray it in real time. And that's what I think they got to do here. I just pray to God in heaven that the long knives are out for her and that they don't let her up today. She's got to be made to confess what she knew and when she knew it. And that hasn't happened so far.
Well, let me just say, you're using some pretty loaded terms there, Greg, that connote violence and so on, and I don't think that's what's required, and I know you don't mean that. It's
all rhetoric. I mean, I'm not talking about sticking something in her, but
let somebody who is inclined to see the worst in both of us misunderstand you. Let's just be clear. You're talking about Congress doing its job.
For
which
once.
Is oversight of the executive branch and ensuring that the public who has a need to know what happened in this particular episode, but honestly, what is happening at the macro level as well. What is happening, of which this episode is, I'm afraid, just a tiny foretaste. What happens when you embolden people who believe it is God's will to destroy you?
Yeah.
When you encourage them to believe they can attack you with impunity. What it will mean when not just, our generation, but future generations are put into the crosshairs in a very literal sense. When the long knives, in fact, the scimitars, in a very literal sense, are being wielded against us, it will mean there will be hell to pay. And in part, it will be part of Hillary Clinton's legacy as Secretary of State. I've written a column in the Washington Times about it. I commend your audience. The sorts of things that I hope somebody on the Hill will get into with her include this larger issue of when did she do it, what did she know, who was she taking counsel from, including her Muslim Brotherhood operative, Huma Abedin, the Deputy Chief of Staff in the State Department, and most especially, Greg, despite the fact that these members of Congress are, if they're lucky, get 5 minutes to ask her a question. And then it's move along. We're got to go on to the next person. And there's very little organized, disciplined follow-up between members because each of them wants their moment in the sun. But we need this kind of cross-examination that will enable the American people to understand the full magnitude of not just the tragedy in Benghazi, but the tragedy that is looming for all of us here in the United States, not just someplace else.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's, of course, you don't finish if you never start. And what I'm saying about this day is this is the chance to start. If their rhetorical skills are sharpened, if I'll get rid of the sword thing, I'll be good here. If they're ready to pin her to her own facts at some point today, that will resonate. What is it that they never have, Frank? They never have facts. President Adams said you can make you're entitled to your own opinion, not your own facts. That's not true if you're a leftist. In liberal America, you get your own facts too. And I'm just saying to you that if some adult before this day's over with, has the temerity to press her with questions of fact. She's getting away with stuff because, hell, in the middle of one of these spats that she was with one of these guys, she turned it all away and started saying, well, it's Republicans' fault because you don't ever talk to each other. You know, she just completely obfuscated. If you say to her, what was the time of your first notification that this was going on, then who told you? And then you go from there. If you say, did you or did you not talk to, listen to, get a cable from Chris Stevens well in advance of this thing? Did you or did you not know of these other attacks in these other places? Why would you not harden these places or evacuate them? Those are the questions she can't hide from. And that's what I'm not hearing.
Yeah, and I get that you want those questions answered, and I do too. And to the extent that that's the full scope of the interrogation, if I can use that term, it will be illuminating about some aspects of this particular fiasco. But Greg, let me ask you this. If what they could really do, and what I argue they desperately need to do, is to establish what role Hillary Clinton played in the decision to arm the people who killed Chris Stevens. I mean, literally, to help arm the people who killed Chris Stevens. In part, Chris was, I think, sanguine about his ability to operate in Benghazi because he had been dealing with these guys in connection with his official duties as the liaison for arming the opposition to Muammar Gaddafi.
Yeah, I don't think there's no.
When does she know it about that?
There's no factual question about that. Yeah.
What does that bespeak about what we're now seeing with those same guys and their arms in Syria, where they're trying to topple another government and bring another Muslim Islamist regime to power there, and in Mali, where they've now taken over half of a country the size of Texas or Alaska? What does it mean in Algeria? What does it mean in Tunisia? What does it mean in Jordan? What does it mean in, I don't know, Saudi Arabia in due course? This is the challenge of our time. And she's gotten it absolutely wrong. She's not alone in that, but she has gotten it absolutely wrong, and that's what needs to be exposed here, because we will, all of us, bear the burden, reap the whirlwind that has been sowed by Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, and that John Kerry and Chuck Hagel and others John Brennan most especially, will now compound in a second administration unless these sorts of questions are asked and the lessons that are needed to be learned are learned from it.
You know, it's interesting. Ladine was saying this morning that he used to, as working for Al Haig, he would ask these foreign service folks what they were doing with regard to anti-terrorism and to the protection of our embassies. And to a man, all it did was make them mad. And the answer was they didn't do anything. This goes all the way back to Reagan. That the State Department has been so risk adverse that they did nothing. Now,
well, look, in part it goes back to Carter, I would say. You know, when
certainly
in 1979 we helped bring Ayatollah Khomeini to power for the purpose, in his mind at least, of waging war against us in the classic Islamist jihadist tradition. And he took our embassy, making all of our diplomats much more risk-averse, you can bet, and he began blowing up things that we cared about, like our embassy in Beirut and our Marine barracks.
Right, and the thing we know about this, with regard to the State Department, is they're never ready. They don't even arm their own people, for crying outside. God bless, my friend. You take care of yourself.